almost like a bowel movement. Yeah. So if it goes this way, more this way. You don't want to get the family shopping channel. You gotta line up, download. You don't want to be selling Tupperware. So to me, I like talks that are instructional in a way. Sometimes it's fun to have, it's humorous and stuff like that, or entertaining, but also that if you walk away with something, actually, I failed, you want to walk away with nothing. But the understanding, non-duality is a beautiful understanding to hold nothing, right? To see that nothing is everything, and that the possibility we're entertaining is a fact. The dilemma that needs to be pointed out is how it's entertained. Because like when you were young, we had Catholic school and some more. Come on in, hon. We had Catholic school, and every week they would talk about God, and they'd have the three qualities of God were omnipotent, omniscient, whatever, the other one. Everywhere, omnipresent, so everywhere, all-knowing, all-powerful. And it used to really surprise me, why am I not running into it, you know? If it's everywhere, I assumed I was somewhere in everywhere, you would think you'd run into it. It would be very easy if someone presented it as always available at all times, right where you are, and then it didn't seem to be available. You can't put it on that which is always available at all times with no requirements necessary. You must have a role in it. You as this activity, you must be the obscuring factor, so to speak, or what obscures it. You're like playing the role of a cloud, obscuring your idea of you from the sun. Yeah. So you could think that you have to get all these things out of the way, but then you're still in the way. Yeah, so the idea of purifying and working and getting better and better, in a sense, you would feel like you take out all the specks on the mirror, so it would be a perfect reflection. But there's a big blur, which is us. Yeah. Hey, come on in. Yeah, come on in. There's child care down the road.
Yeah, across the street.
Put them there. There's some things to play. Grab some seats. Some chairs and stuff. We started already, so you missed you missed the golden handshake. So what happened with me is, I had a dis-ease or discomfort seemingly that motivated a lot of seeking. There was an agitation, and things didn't really ever change that. I would get some reprieve, but then I would be out looking. And it led to me when I was young, after a run of doing a lot of drugs, that it had to be a sort of inside job. I knew that much. I knew that it wasn't going to be triggered by outside stuff. It came to me pretty early. Yeah. But to see the dilemma is, once you start looking in, it's that which thinks it's looking in is the problem. It's not that you don't find what's there. You are what's there. Yeah. And so the wanting to find what's there is the dilemma. So the there doesn't have to be described. The there is there to be found out. It's a form of knowledge of finding out, not knowing. Knowing is you've missed it. Yeah, because you are the knowing. Yeah. And the knowing cannot be known. You can't become something else to know the knowing. You're the knowing everything else. But you can't be something else to know the knowing. If you go that way, you're going to be really frustrated. But you may look really cool, like loving gaze and very calm and peaceful and not agitated physically or whatever. But you're not, the bondage of self is still active, yeah? Because you're trying to find what you are from what you're not. And the activity of what you're not is incredibly subtle. When you're seemingly in it, you don't know you're in it. See, that's the beautiful disguise of identification as. Yeah? When you're identified as something else, you don't know you're identified as something else. It's just that freaking simple. If you're identified, if the act of identifying with something else is doing its job, you don't know you're in the act of being identified as something else. So the something else now becomes your starting point. It's assumed to be you. It's where you're thinking from, seemingly. It's where you're looking for from. It's where you're searching from. And that from is sort of unquestioned. There's not much, there's an assumption or an insinuation that just skips over that issue completely. And now you're busily looking for what you are from what you're not. So for what you're not to be looking for what you are has got to be objectified. It has to be made into something. So enlightenment or awakening or whatever title it is. So now you, untouched, starts looking for your ideal, conceptual ideal of what you are. But again, it's defeated from the get-go because you're looking for enlightenment from what you're not. Yeah? You've been moved to a different square on the game board. So the game starts, it's like ready, set, go. It starts, let's say, at square 5 instead of square 0. And from square 5, missing the first 4 squares changes the whole meaning of the game. I think someone just walked by there. Just yell out there, some wandering spiritual seeker. I can tell him from a mile away.
Over here.
Yeah.
Come on down.
Yeah. So if this is taken to be what's so has to be made into something else. And you can idealize it, you can sanctify it, you can nobilize it. You can make it exotic and to make it so special, first of all, it has to have certain qualities. First one, you don't notice it's not you. You make what you are not you. Then it has to be exotic, usually. It has to be infrequent to make it special. And usually there's got to be some other person or thing, an enlightened one involved in you finding it. Yeah. It's a perfect business plan. And there's a lot of situations that take advantage of that. Yeah? Seeking is sort of not on the narrow, sparse road. It's like in a flea market. There's kiosks all the way selling you something as you go along, looking for your idealized self. And it would be fine if that was what you were looking for, but it isn't. What you're looking for is what's looking. That's the dilemma. But the mental state is busily claiming what's looking and using it to fuel that there's a you that's looking for. What? In the spiritual situation, you're looking for what's looking, but as something other than what's looking. You can't imagine that what's looking, called Paul, is what you're looking for. It seems like you've been trying to get out of it since you were like 5 or 6. It would ruin your whole story in time. What? It would disqualify, just show you that all that time from the position of what you're not was fucking completely wasted. It's like the first awakening is a rude awakening, really. You realize, Jesus Christ, I've been bitching about all these big heads blocking me from the movie, but it's my big fucking head. Yeah? Once that gets moved, everything becomes clear. Not because they were waiting for something, you're the unclarity. You're the obscuring factor. And how is that obscuring factor going on unnoticed, yet it's affecting us completely? Look at all the drive to get out of oneself in this world. I was just talking to people who are starting a program in Asia, and now the big thing is crystal meth in Asia and in Australia, and then it leads to sexual addiction, because now you're in the mental fantasy realm, and now you're just going to try to, have almost like your own living porno movie. All right, I'll get the 2 people, get them in that position, and I found I have done that in my life, and in fact, it's more empty than ever. It's totally empty. The mental fantasy world is like smoking clouds. They just disperse, and you're left with the same old fucking agitation. Yeah, and the more that isn't better. It doesn't work. Yeah, because the act of being identified as something you're not geometrically progresses, because that mental process will claim everything that's happening to imply that it's you. So even meditation, even acts that you feel are sanctified, are under the purview of being claimed by the mental state. And you can meditate like crazy, and it won't skip a beat. It'll use every moment of meditation to imply the meditator. And if that meditator affixes, then suddenly that beautiful event of meditation is being co-opted by the mental state. I'm not saying it's guaranteed, but it's happening. Yeah. So all your activity that you think is getting yourself out of the hole is furnishing the hole. Inevitably, all the activities of spirituality, if they truly work for you, are going to fail you. And you're going to be left with this situation. And then you'll come across some of the great writings. I think, come on in. Yeah. Come on in. Some of the great writings, and you'll see the beauty of the messages, of the simplicity of it, because they basically boil down to warnings after a while. They're warning us, hey, if you're at this position and you have the ears to hear this message, you cannot use the Buddha to seek the Buddha. Who else would that message, or what else would that message be to but to the Buddha? What else is that message being directed at other than the Buddha? AKA Chase, AKA Paul. So the message doesn't see Paul. There's the appearance of Pauling. The message isn't to Paul, it's to the Buddha. Seemingly disguised as Paul, and it's talking to the Buddha. Hey, Buddha, aka Paul, you can't use the Buddha as Paul to seek the Buddha. What more do you, That's the teaching. And if you hear it and it goes, like your dog head goes, something like that, then wear the shoe, it fits, and then see what happens. There'll be downloads concerning the topic you've just been introduced to, which is the act of being identified as something that you're not. And it may reveal that you have seemingly been in that act for a long freaking time. And that I have, since like 6 years old, been trying to get out of self, this feeling of being the doer, the thinker, the one, as self, the feeling of being the thinker, the doing, the one, by changing what I was doing, trying to change what I was thinking, trying to change what I was aspiring to, and it didn't freaking work, because all the movements to change Paul was claimed by Paul to reinforce Paul. What? Yeah. You mean all those freaking retreats in Thailand, sitting down for 13 hours? Yeah. They were being used to create a new Paul called Spiritual Paul. First, build a little resume, yeah? And then when you can go back to that resume, I've meditated on 4 continents, and I've done da-da-da-da. And now, boom, that little plant grows in the fucking fertile soil, and now you're a spiritual seeker, which is a lot more slimy than other things. I mean, alcoholics and addicts, at least there are fucking interventions. There's no interventions for spiritual seeking. No one's going to call you and say, we've noticed you bought 20 retreats. We strongly advise you to stop fucking going on retreats. You know, that would be an incredible spiritual public announcement. You know, just, hey, 30 retreats, $200,000. Where the fuck are you? On the phone, signing up for another one. Get the fucking message thing. I mean, unless you love it, and it's fine. Commerce is great. Throw the money around. But if there is a humble or a subtle belief that you're going to do yourself out of something, yeah, or to do yourself into being, it's not going to work. Because the being is already so. It's cooking right now. It never gets taken off the stove. Yeah. But we don't see it because we're looking in a certain way called self-centeredness. It's just that simple. We don't see verbs, we see nouns. And what we are is a verb. It's verbing. What we are is an activity. It's sort of like that thing with the river. You know, you could go to the Colorado River, get a glass of the Colorado River, go home, and everyone comes over to your house. Oh, there's the Colorado River. But by claiming or trying to get the Colorado River, you've lost the essence of the Colorado River, which is rivering. It's not fucking moving. You know, that's the whole point. We're being right now. There's not a being that's relaxing right now. It took a break from being for a while. No, there's being. There's no A in front of it. There's being what? Every fucking thing else, seemingly. But everything else is generated by being. Yeah. Why be so addicted to the cart when someone presents the horse? Now the horse is in front of the cart. Life makes freaking sense. You start traveling lighter. As that, see, this will get its most heartfelt wish, but by not using it to get it. Yeah? This will be an expression of traveling lighter. It's never going to acquire traveling later. It's going to express traveling later, just like it's expressing traveling heavy. It's expressing the condition it seems to be in. Now it wants to believe it can get itself into the condition, but in fact, something else gets it into the condition. Even in recovery, there was a famous psychiatrist, and he talks about surrender, which is a huge aspect of recovery, and he says his take was surrender is really an unconscious event, or as it's captured, I believe, in the big book, something gets to the innermost, which is your outermost, Paul is unconscious of. Pretty much Paul is like 1/10 of 1% of what's going on. And then everything bubbles up to the surface, the mental state's lingering up there and then claims it. Oh, I had that thought, I did that. But no, you didn't fucking do any of it. You showed up and there was a doing of stuff, and then here in this courtroom, you're convicted because you were there as a body. But in fact, did you really do it? The evidence is you take 5 minutes of any day at any time and sit and just see all's revealed. Everything is just replicating and duplicating. Selfing doesn't have 80,000 tricks. It has a few. Just duplicates and replicates. And in different degrees of, it has big problems, small problems, but it's always you that's having all the problems. You don't see your role in it. Our role in it is, as the Course in Miracles would imply, we're giving everything all the meaning it has. That's a big role here. If you're the giving of all the meaning to everything that's here, that's what does that imply? That you're this victim of being Paul who never felt love? Come on. It's the demonstration of what you are overrides the little story of who you are, unbelievably. So how do you, see, to me, you really start knowing what's going on here when you get relief from it. To me, it's all reverse engineering. There's relief, and then there's downloads about why the relief didn't seem to be available. And you're in all of it. The act of identification is the root of it. It's the Petri dish that's allowing all this shit to grow. Yeah? You are in a state of mistaking what you are for something you're not. And then starting your life and ending your life from that misplaced reference point. That's it. And it never happened. It just seems to be happening. It needs time to appear to be happening. It never happened. Every night you go to sleep, there's not one fucking trail of you when you go into deep sleep. Your footprints end where really everything begins. Yeah? In deep sleep, there's no sign of you. There's no effect of you at all. All is like an Etch-a-Sketch that's totally erased. And then you wake up again, and then the movie starts, Yeah, you see, oh, this is my room, this is this, and this. You sort of like GPS yourself into the role, and then polling happens all day. And then you, thank God, sooner or later at night, you go into where it's, the whole charade is completely, none of the circus tents were ever put up. You don't have to waste any time trying to break the circus tent down. That's the bigger circus. You trying to get out of the circus is the bigger circus, yeah? And if we're so damn important, why are we, we're off the game board for 8 hours a day. 1/3 of the day we're not moving and shaking. So if we're the big wazoo, the big kahuna, we're really, out to lunch 1/3 of the day. We don't have, it's not a big role we're in. What's under it, what's all around it, it is so unbelievable compared to this little moving trajectory of a rock hitting the surface of consciousness. Most of the time you're out to lunch, basically. You know those rocks, they skim 3 or 4. We're conscious maybe 4 times a day. Hours go by. And then we skim, we come up to the surface and then back to the skimming. It's weird, you have these talks, and we're talking about sublime shit, and then you try to say the next week's schedule, and everyone's perplexed. Is it this Wednesday? Come on. You can't even follow a shopping list. Don't believe, this doesn't have to get it. Its highest level is to realize it can't get it. That's a good state, because then it opens up to more direction, yeah? So the I don't know, like in Zen, is the highest form of mind. Don't know, because what happens then, you find out. And finding out is much more convincing than knowing, because if you use this system to know, then the most important moment to remember knowing that is it's unknown. Like you read the relationship books, and you're okay, I know exactly what's going to happen when I start putting my foot in my mouth, but you put the fucking foot in your mouth. The book didn't help you. Yeah? But finding out is different. It's a whole different way. And the knowledge doesn't get stored, it just moves through. Like you need to know what you need to know when you need to know it. How efficient could life be, and other than that? Yeah? So I humbly, from listening and practicing stuff, I came to this conclusion, and it was the first video we ever did, which is one of the simplest ways to express it, which was the sheep and the lion. It's a famous thing that Papaji used and other people have used in history in India. India, they've had a lot of time to entertain this kind of stuff, yeah? So they came with a beautiful story about the lion cub and the mother roaming around, and then something kills the mother, and the lion cub is on his own little recognizance, yeah? And it's a little shaky, it hasn't really become developed into an idea of being what it is, so it sees a herd of sheep, and it starts moving towards those sheep. Now the sheep know it's a lion, so they're a little anxious, but then they realize, hey, this lion doesn't even know it's a lion. And they sort of adopt it into their little herd, and now the lion starts living as a sheep. Yeah, and it has a little bit of irritability, restless discontent, because it's not a sheep. So they're talking about who's going to be the sweater next year, and he's not that interested. And they're trying to, curl its hair and giving it barring lessons, and it's sort of going along with it. It even marries a sheep, and has some other sheep weird hybrids, then it becomes a big elder in the flock, in the herd, but it's always had this feeling of discontent. Vague, has everything a sheep would ever want, and actually feels pretty courageous as a sheep. Doesn't take any shit as a sheep, but still it's not really working. So one day they're all chewing the cud, hanging around, and a big old lion comes into the area and starts chasing after the herd to kill a sheep, and it sees out of the corner of its eye a lion. It thinks this lion's joining the hunt, so it's running, but then it realizes the lion's running with the sheep. So it veers off and it goes after the lion, and it catches the young lion. The young lion rolls on its back and goes, "Please, Mr. Lion, don't eat me, I'm a humble sheep." Now the old lion's pretty perplexed, so he just grabs the young lion, drags it to this water hole, and just puts their both heads over the water. The water reflects, and the young lion roars, yes? Now, before, if it kept being in the identification as a sheep, if it would have heard the message, "You're a lion," and that lioness would have went, lion in it would have went, "Yeah, this sounds pretty good." But when the sheep identification would capture the message, which it does, it would translate it into, "I can become like a lion." Yeah? So now, this is the double whammy. Because now the lion, unbeknownst to itself, as identified as a sheep, now starts trying to become like a lion, which is the exact, it's going to prolong its not getting to be a lion longer than all the other shit would have done. Even though it's got a story, I really want to become like a lion, and it joins other sheep that want to become like a lion, and they get old lion pictures, and they put them up on the walls, and they have candles, and they read the qualities of a lion, they chant, "I'm a lion, I'm a lion." But a lion never needs to chant that it's a lion. It's a lion. A sheep would have to chant it's a lion because it's taken itself to be a sheep. Yeah? That's why chanting "I'm a lion" goes like 10 days as a sheep, and it go on for 40 years. But the message is, hey, wait a minute, stop talking about the message "I'm a lion." Talk about what it's like to be a sheep. Yes? And maybe the lion will go, "Wait a minute, yeah, I'm not that." Bammo. Then it finds out it's a lion. That works. Yes? Exactly. It's all about the approach in this message. If that which you're not claims to be the hearer of this message, you're going to be going to talks like this for 30 years. Yeah? Literally, you will. If as the great Huang Po said, if the Buddha hears the message, hey, you can't use the Buddha to seek the Buddha, things are going to change. If Paul hears the message, not as the Buddha, as Paul's going to enter Buddhism to try to acquire the traits or qualities it believes the Buddha used to exhibit. Yeah? And by practicing to be a Buddhist, he'll become more like the Buddha. Sounds very noble in the world of sheep and stuff, but you're a lion. It's getting hot in here, right? Yeah. Whip it off. I was busily being a lion there for a second, doing it off camera. Didn't want to show the real lion. He's a lion. It's not like that. You're going to appear like a sheep to sheep. That's the message. Everything else, and then from there on, it's all spiritual warnings, really. They try to attempt to tell you, oh, these are the common pitfalls, yes? If you cheat trying to get out of an imaginary place, you're giving reality to the imaginary place. Yeah. Self cannot get out of self. You can't use the product of the system to get out of the system. It will still be the system. Yeah? They're like spiritual shoes you put on, and if you're ready, they'll fit, you wear them, and see what downloads. Yeah? And as Buddha said, be a light unto yourself. That's what this message is. This message isn't you're signing up for 8 years of courses. It's basically about nothing. And if you come back 8 years from now, it will be about nothing. Yeah? Because I truly believe if you're left with your own devices, and you see they sure seem to be like everyone else's devices, well, maybe they're not yours. Maybe the clone will recognize that it's a clone, and therefore not a clone. Yeah? That's the beauty of it. How could these thoughts be mine if you haven't? How could these feelings I feel no one else have? I hear a lot of people share my feelings. Why, if you're a scientist or something and you investigate. If everyone has my thoughts, my feelings, and do the same things I do in certain situations, they can't be mine. They're a standardized model of processing a fucking world that we're missing, basically. And so I realized, hey, I'm a Ford in a fleet of Fords. Yeah. And then you realize, far out, suddenly something happens. You hear the description of the car, and you see that you're not the car. As soon as you see you're not the car, you can get out of it. But a car can never get out of a car. Being identified as a body, that body's never getting out of the identification as a body. I don't care how many years you chant, I'm not a body. What's chanting is the body idea. What's not a body doesn't chant, it's not a body. It's very clear it's not a body. What wants to get out of the body is the body. Yeah? What's seeking is not the sought. You can't use it to find itself. You see what you're not, you study about what you're not, you come to these talks and learn about what you're not. So what happens? What you are gets triggered, and what you are sees what it's not. It sees, I don't mean vision-wise, in mind, it sees what's been described, sounds very familiar, and then it's here to get the punchline, and that's not you. Yeah? That which is saying it's the one who's worrying about next week isn't. There's worrying about next week, but there isn't a one that's worrying about next week. The way we hold the worrying about next week is used to imply there's a one. The one isn't there, and then there's the worrying about next week. There's worrying about next week held in English, in ignorance, and then there's the one. The one gets produced by the worrying about next week, not the other way around. The worrying about next week arises. How it's held is, it implies me. Suddenly the me is what's worrying about next week. We had a perfect example in LA. A guy shared with me, he says, okay, I get what you're saying. So let's call this identification as self-Pauling, all right? So is Pauling free from that all day? And I said, Pauling is never free from the identification as self. There's the identification as self, and that is what implies the Paul. And as soon as it implies the Paul, the statement is Paul is in the act of being identified as self. You see it? There's the idea of being identified as self. When it's held in the wrong way, it implies that there's a Paul, and now you suddenly say Paul's identified as self. But it was the identified as self that produced the Paul. You see? You can see it. It does a switcheroo. Something that comes after is implied to be before. How are you going to see where the fuck you're going? Where you're going if your compass is pointing completely differently? That which comes after is implied to be before, so it has no clue what's going on because it's looking backwards. So you see it, it's beautiful. So it's very, very innocently, the person says, okay, Paul, so there's identification as self. And therefore see, it's like, there's Pauling, and the Pauling produces a sense of Paul, and then when you describe it, you go, Paul was Pauling. But there was just Pauling, then the idea of Paul. The idea of Paul comes after the Pauling, goes, and now suddenly you own the identification as Paul. You've been doing it. You haven't. What is it? Why would I get into this? Because there's freedom there. You're prior to it. This whole mental gymnastics of that which comes after implying to be before is never before what you are. It comes after what you are. Never to be before what you are. It is not causing a damn thing to what you are. Like you're untouched. Just like, do you have to go through 8 hours of purification to enter deep sleep at night? No freaking way. The body just goes out, deep sleep. Is there, really, do you have to have a resume? Okay, I've done all this good shit today. I deserve to go into deep sleep. No. You fucking ripped and rolled and did anything. You knock out. There's one point. You're completely, seemingly gone, which means you're completely always here. Yeah? And in that, there's not one speck of you. All your transgressions are gone from the day. Now, when you wake up in the movie the next day, then the money you owe to the court remembers all this shit, and now you're in Rome and you got to do as the Romans do. But are you a Roman? No freaking way. No, no, no. See what you're not, and you'll find out what you are, instead of looking for what you are from what you're not. Just have a simple correction. Get the horse in front of the cart, see what happens. If it translates as traveling idle for a while, the correction that never needed to be corrected has been made. Chill out, relax. That topic is not under your jurisdiction anymore. You're not trying to you have yourself into being. You're just doing whatever's available today, and the being's untouched. Yeah. You don't need a great description of what you're not, or what you are heard from what you're not. It will go nowhere. You've got to realize this message isn't to you. It's thrown over your head and letting mind catch it. Because if Paul hears about the Buddha, it goes nowhere. But if the Buddha hears about Paul, it goes freaking somewhere. Yeah? Because it's going to come to a very quick realization, I'm not that. And what happens? The meaning that is constantly being siphoned through this identification gets distributed differently. Your interest and attention, instead of wedded to this dead preoccupation of everything is about me, gets spread out. It's not concentrated or focused. It's like a big space, and you feel that sense of presence. You're freaking on with no off switch. And the on wasn't promoted by you or permitted by you or anything. It's running no matter freaking what. And you will feel as if you're finally freaking home. Yeah. And for me, it translated over time, and it was crowned like the last answer years ago. And no new answer has been needed. And to me, a last answer is a great answer in time because it negates any need for any more answers concerning that topic. So now you get into the living of it, not the studying of it, not the knowing of it, not the doing towards it, but the living of it. And you'll be put to freaking good use in your own life and other people's lives with no thought or effort on your part. You'll be available because you're present. And if you're available and present, you're of service. You feel it, you know. Even with the ammonia-drenched smell in this room, it smells like a nice perfume. And if Chivo's doesn't have that good coffee, it's us making it good. Everything tastes great. Freaking shit. Yeah, you're like what you're looking for. You've just been misdirected. What we are has been turned to the task of finding what it is from a point of what it's not. It's all very confusing and confounding until it ain't. And when it ain't, it's very simple. Just a simple misdirection, that's all. Something that comes after has implied that it's before to what's before. And what's before is believing it, so it seems to be before. Yeah? Once what's before stops believing it, it's put in its rightful place. An activity of the mental freaking state that comes after, in time. So when you put the boot and the Eiffel Tower down, you don't start at square 5. It's on square 0. And the game is seen in a different way. Yeah? And it's funny, because every time something happens on square 23, it reveals square 0. If you get to the highest square, 89, it reveals square 0. After you realize all the other squares are appearing in square 0. You've never gone anywhere. Nothing's ever really happened. It's always been available at all times. Right where you are. Because you're square 0. You are the game in a sense. You are prior to the game. You're not a piece on it. You're not a boot. You're not an Eiffel Tower. You are that which is seen right now. In all of its 5 senses we can recognize, hearing, feeling, tasting, touching, there's all seen. If there was 30 sense doors, there'd be 30 sense experiences. There's no quantifying seeing by the doors it has to move through here. You see through 800,000 doors, and not one drop of it would run out. It's an infinite quality. It's always available at all times, right where we are. It's bright, luminous, and one little bit here triggers all of it. Yes? Yeah. So, there you have it. Any questions today? No. That was fast. Yep.
Could you go slow one more time, Paul, to be sure that I understand this? So things happen in this ocean of infinite possibilities, everything happens, right? And then the idea of Paul arises, right? It's just like everything else.
Yeah.
And
It seems to have a dominance because that which is pays attention to it for, let's say, a short period of time, 90 years or something. And then it stops paying attention to it, yeah?
I think I understand the switcheroo that you're talking to, that nothing really ever
Don't
happens to
understand.
Paul.
You don't need to understand that. You believe understanding is going to lead you somewhere. It doesn't. Understanding stops you from walking. Doesn't lend itself to another couple of miles of hiking. You get the understanding. There's nothing you can do about any of this. Hallelujah.
But then it's like nothing ever happens, not even Paul happens. Nothing happens.
See, why don't you stay on the other side of the butt? The world starts after butt, yeah? Oh, I really feel great here, but next Tuesday I'll be on my job. Your head is constantly pledging allegiance to the God of time and other places. See it. See what you're worshiping, more so than getting an understanding. See what the mental state is truly worshiping. It's worshiping self.
Yes, I see that.
So just see that and let everything else be found out, not understood.
I got it.
Yeah, the understanding is for out here when you're having a bad day and stuff. It's a skillful means. But the understanding doesn't lead to the vision. The vision illuminates the understanding. And your vision is an untapped resource. You're that. Yeah? So you find, so let's say you get introduced to an understanding that really teases out the light of what you are. That's your seed assignment. You're not supposed to be a Buddhist this lifetime. You're not supposed to be this, that. This is your seed assignment. Yeah? Non-duality, if you want to call it that. Yeah? You can't argue with the foot, with the shoe. If the shoe fits, wear it. You can't go back. This is pointless. Something's been revealed. You freaking go along with the master plan. I'm not happy about this message. You can't really make it a business plan, really. You'd have to make it something else to make it look exciting to the masses. And it doesn't. It's really about nothing, you know? Yeah.
So if the sleight of hand had a process, we are being, and out of this being comes the essence of Scott. And the sleight of hand says, it pulls it back here and says, I'm living from I own, this being that owns that Scott. What you're saying is, don't let it slip back here. Be the being in the essence and let it stop there.
Yeah.
And don't own the essence.
Well, the thing is, there's no one there to own it. You can just describe the activity, and then the primary activity, that inactivity seems like complete stillness, sees it. Yeah, so now it sees the selfing, and if it sees the selfing, it sees all the pointing, but it doesn't leap into the pointed. Yeah, it just sees all the pointing. That's all the mental state and the processes are doing. They're being used to imply there's someone there. You see all the implying, but there isn't the leap that I'm that, which is that imagination, that mythical, that made-up idea of being the Paul that's there. There's nothing there but pointing. Yeah? So you see the selfing. See, this is what happens. People hear about the selfing, then they used to call me up and they go, oh, I've been selfing all day. I said, no, that's not the selfing. The feeling of being the one that's been selfing is the product of the selfing. Or they say, the selfing's been driving me crazy. I said, no, the selfing is just being used, and it seems to have worked because you feel like you're the one that's been driven crazy. That's the point of the selfing, is to imply the one. Don't take your eye off the ball. The selfing is a diversion. You see that it's being used to point to the one. Yes? The one that isn't the one. That's all. So you watch, see, the seeing is the innate quality that cannot be touched. Yes? That's where the reliance is. You can see the selfing. You can see the activities. And you can see the herd of donkeys with all their, the tails have been put on all the donkeys. And as seemingly as they go by you, as the theater screen, all their tails flow. So all the thoughts go with the my tail, my thoughts, my thoughts, my thoughts, my feelings, my feelings, my feelings, my actions, my actions, my actions. That's what happens all day. Yeah? So they're going by, passing on the screen of consciousness, and there's a made-up fucking tail that's been stuck on them, and as soon as they seem to come into your purview, your little part of the consciousness, the tail goes, and it goes, every thought is implied that it's yours or about you. All the feelings imply they're yours, very subtly or obviously. Every last one of them are being used to imply there's a you and it's crowned the feeler, or it's crowned the thinker, or in the most dominant one, it's crowned the doer. Yeah? And in that's where the bondage of self lies. It's an activity that's going on. Now, the activity will still go on. The character that seems to be projected on the screen of consciousness will still get fucked, but now you're the screen. You see? And you've never not been the screen. You don't get kicked off the screen as Paul. Paul appears on the movie in the screen, thinking it did it and trying to use this knowledge as, oh, I'm not the doer, but it still fucking thinks it's the doer all freaking day. Yeah? Not the doer, it can't be chanting this. But now, you're on the level of the screen, let's say 51% of you, of your attention and interest. Now, this doesn't go into the character. It sees the character from here, not sees everything the character sees from the character. It sees the character, and it's very clear, I'm not that. There's nothing wrong or right with it. It's, I'm not that. It's not like, I'm not that. Like, ooh, that's nice. No, it's, I'm not that factually. It's just, I'm not that. But it's not like, I'm not that, and then I'm going to escape from that. No, I'm not that. And it keeps going on. You keep getting bills. You keep fucking stepping on people's toes. You keep bothering people. They bother you. The whole shit goes on. But now, it's like, where's Waldo? And you don't have any interest in fucking finding Waldo. So you're in the movie, but it's not like fucking all day, spotlights. Yes? Yeah. So what happens? then that little activity on that thinks it's everything in this eternity of 70 years or 80 years is going to live, which is nothing, right? All that meaning being poured into it, it travels lighter. All the hills and dales action figure Paul's going to have to deal with, it's been trying to avoid with spirituality, you're in it, you'll just travel lighter through it all. And then it said, it proclaims something, maybe to the jury. The action figure goes, hey, that's more than enough. What more did I ever want but to travel lighter? Yeah. Whoo, far out. If the screen could crack a smile, it would crack a smile. It doesn't, because now it travels lighter. There's less of a burden on others and on itself, can be put to use. And there's levels of beauty that this can reach. Surrender, compassion, holding the space for others. It doesn't have the highest ceiling, but it can reach certain places, yeah? And it can be put to use, and it can be a damn good conveyor of things, yeah? It's got the hose-like quality. It can allow things to move through it, yeah? Yeah, if it's directed correctly. If it's directed by the mental state, we see what it produces. Exclusivity, being right, fucking vindictiveness, competition, win at all costs. These aren't that endearing. They're not long-lasting qualities. They're like a fucking quick ejaculation of the mental state. Like fucking beating off. I won. Yeah, did you really win? Fuck, no. So, yep. And it's just an invitation, but don't make anything out of it, honey. You've made so much shit out of things already. Let this thing, don't try to take the furniture out. Let the fucking floor collapse. Oh shit will just go down. Yeah? Yeah. It's your head holding it up. It wants to know. Give up. Really? Just have a good latte today. Yeah. All right, so we'll end. Oh, wait a minute. Let's pass the basket. Do you want to turn that off, John?